Hey fam, Vic Hickson. Just want to share a little bit with you about the Freemantown and the upcoming Freemantown reunion that's coming up this year. I'm Vic Hickson, and unfortunately, with our culture, a lot of us don't really know our relationship past our mom or grandmother in these days. And I'm one of the ones, by the time I was old enough, I never had the opportunity to meet my grandmother on my mom's side. And so all of this stuff about history is starting to be an unfold today, to learn more about my mother's heritage. And my mom is Mary Hickson, and her mother was Helen Johnson, who married a fellow by the name of Joel Johnson. Helen was a descendant of Emma Freeman, who was married to Ambrose Johnson. And Emma was the sister of William Thomas Freeman and also the daughter of Meade Freeman. And that whole family, the Freemantown family, is what encompassed Freemantown. And Freemantown was a community which existed in the late 1800s inside of what's now considered Berry College. And I don't know if a lot of you know, but Berry College is the largest college campus in the world. And, for that to sit into my backyard, I think, that's a big part of history that we should be excited about. But even more exciting to know what that particular property was before it was established as Berry College, and it was known as Freemantown. And Freemantown was established by William Thomas Freeman and his brothers, and it was over about 600 acres of land, and they divided that land into 5 different families. And it's just some interesting information that I wanted to share with you guys, and also want to encourage you guys to continue to research in order to protect, preserve, and restore some of the history that we can continue to build on today. And unfortunately, in our culture, a lot of the history as far as the African-American slave, it's been wiped out. But a lot of this information now is starting to be uncovered. And it's up to us. Our ancestors are long gone. And so it's up to us to preserve this rich, deep history. So we have a reunion that's coming up. It starts tomorrow. And we have family that are starting to arrive in town. And, and I just, when I go out into public, I share with people, and a lot of them think I'm crazy because I say it, but all roads lead to Rome. If you think about your history, think about the migration northward. And a lot of the African-American community history started in communities like Rome, Georgia. So I just want to, offer you guys that motivation to continue to search, continue to look to see your background, your heritage, and how important it is. One of the things that just give me goosebumps, you think about the time of the 1800s and think about the abolitionists like Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, even John Brown, and the possibility that your ancestors were able to walk shoulder to shoulder with these guys. I mean, I don't know if that's for a fact, but I do know, with places like Freemantown and the rich history that Martha Berry had with her schools where, they had people coming in like presidents and former presidents and Henry Ford coming in. That makes me think that we had some of the prestigious African Americans also stopping through communities like Freemantown. And we will never know if we just let this information sit. So I just want to come in today and encourage you guys to continue to peel back a lot of that history and uncover it and learn and research it and provide it with your family. So that's the purpose of me here today. I come up in a family of 6. It was 6 of us. And, when I think about me coming up and I look at how my mom them came up, it was 9 of my mom brothers and sisters, and they came up in a 1-room house, and to know at one point in time that we owned over 600 acres of land to be reduced to a one-room house. And then even the time that I grew up and dealing with some of the racism that exists, it just put things in perspective. My mom, she stayed on me. I wasn't a bad kid, but she always wanted the best for me and my sisters and brothers. And I'm not a perfect kid, wasn't a perfect kid, but as I grew older and started to understand my history and my heritage, it motivated me to want to do more, to be able to go out and teach and mentor. So now, I grew up, I went off to school, came back and really wanted to make a difference in my community. I've been a small business owner for the last 21 years or so, and been working with the school system for the last 4 or 5 years, mentoring at-risk kids, at-risk youth, to encourage them to be better and to do better and to go out and strive in certain arenas. So, I tell people, Rome is probably one of the prettiest cities that you will ever go to. We have nice walking trails. We have nice venues to go to. It's known as the city of 7 hills and 3 rivers. And I partake in a lot of that stuff. But it kind of, as I do research on my particular family, and I read a lot of the names who wanted to oppress my family, and to go around town and see remnants of those people. I was just thinking about that on the way over here. It's hurtful. We have the Forest Hotel, and Nathan Bedford Forrest was one of the generals in the Confederate that wanted to keep our family in bondage. And a lot of those, even though we were making progression to remove a lot of those names, I just don't think, it's happening quick enough. Because we're in 2023, and this was taking place during the Civil War in 1861 through 64. So, I like I say, we're making advancements. It's just some things in my town that I don't believe are happening fast enough. I don't, I don't, I don't remember anything about Freemantown personally. One of my great uncles, one of the many men that I really, really admire, um, was a fellow by the name of Major Drew. And Major was a great uncle to me. My grandfather name was Walter Drew. And my grandfather passed away when I was young. I may have been 4 or 5 years old. But I just remember, I remember him so much. And a lot of people, they call me Mr. Walt because they say I look just like him. So Mr. Major, which we affectionately called him, just reminded me so much of my grandfather. And he was, Mr. Major probably was about 90, 94, 95 when he passed away, but he was an independent guy. He would, I'm talking about 80, 85 years old. He would get out and cut his own yard. Had no running water, had no bathroom in the house. He had a well. He had an old dog, and I can't remember the dog's name. But and my mom and I, and that's one of the reasons why I love my mom. Because she taught me at a young age, and I did not know. She would take us and she would go visit people, whether they were elderly, whether they were sick. And to this day, I find myself doing that. But we would go and see Mr. Major, and we would go and get him. And he lived out in Almerchi, and he would want to come into town, and we would go and get him and take him to the doctor's office or to his visits or to his bank or whatever. And every time we passed Berry College, he would say, "Good old Freemantown," and I couldn't have been no more than about 7 or 8 years old. I had no idea what he meant. And that's what makes Freemantown special, because now I know. He you figure Major was 94 when he died, so he was born almost into slavery. And for him to be able to see how a community is you know, that's changing right before his eyes, and him remembering these things. And I just wish that I could go back and talk to him more about, you know, the remnants of Freemantown. What was it like? And Cheryl, who you guys are here from, it just reminds me of her story, and her father and grandfather, talking about how the grass was so green and how the water was so pure. And if you go out on Berry campus today and just ride Berry campus and just think about back in 1860 to the 1900s, and you can just imagine how beautiful that land was, you know, and how close knit of a community. I mean, Freemantown was probably one of the only self-sustaining Black communities in this area. I mean, that wasn't heard of back in the late 1800s. That was, I mean, you know, that was almost unheard of. But to see how a unit was able to come together and cultivate the land and be a self-sufficient community. And you look at today's world where not only African Americans, but all races are struggling either to have a simple apartment or to buy a car. You know, so it just puts me back in a time when things were a lot similar. And even though it was a lot of hate, there was also a lot of love. And that's what is special to me. And that coming from being ignited from a major figure in my life, like Mr. Major, is real special. You know, I got to do the introduction for the Freemantown tomorrow, and I'm not the one who like history. I never been a research guy or essay guy, but you know, as I was tasked to do the introduction tomorrow, I mean, I'm up to 12 pages, and, and and I mean, it stretches from the Emancipation Proclamation to the last movement of family out of Freemantown, and it's just an amazing story, and I think it's something that other families, I'm sure, have dealt with, but they don't know. And for me to be able to know that part of my history and that part of my culture, I just feel blessed and honored.
I had got up, but I sat back down because I think this is important because our mental state is so shallow in a sense. I recently ran for a city commission, and as I was out on the campaign trail, sitting in different forums and being questioned by certain people who feel like, you know, they have set society in order. I don't, you know, if that makes sense. And one of the questions that would come out a lot is, what do I think make me qualified as a city commissioner? It's in my DNA. You know, I've had family members who have orchestrated a whole community. And it just bugs me because so often African Americans are shorted. Like, you know, we're not smart enough, or we're not able to coordinate things, or we're not able to come up and develop certain or with ideas and things like that. But that is the biggest lie that was ever told to our people. We are inventionists. We are people who come in and are able to form communities and thrive in communities. And I just want our younger generation who have been told, no, you can't do that, or no, you're not smart enough, just continue to move. Because if you can look over history, and a lot of the inventions that we don't know about have came from African Americans. I was at the barbershop this morning, they were talking about, Neil Armstrong going to the moon, but they don't talk about the young lady who did the mathematics that was able to calculate the distance and get him to the moon. So I just want our young people to know that we come from greatness, regardless of what you said. But even before slavery, we were kings and queens before slavery, but our slaves, that was just a condition that we had to live in at that time. That didn't mean that we weren't smart enough or able to communicate and cultivate society. We have actually added to society. And so don't ever let nobody tell you that you're not smart enough to do something that you want to do.
I am a fifth generation Freeman. My grandfather, I'll start at the beginning. Meade Freeman was my great grandfather. Sanford Freeman was my great grandfather, and my grandfather's name was Kathy Everett Freeman. My mother's name is Bobby Freeman. And of course, as I said earlier, my name is Cheryl Freeman Snipes. We live in Michigan. About 13 years ago, my mother decided she wanted to see where her father was born. That's what ignited my interest in Freemantown. I looked online and found an article that said, look, they were looking for lost descendants of Freemantown. So I answered the call. Came down, found the cemetery, saw what my grandfather had always told us about his children, that it was a beautiful green, luscious land and the rich red clay dirt. I didn't find the apple trees that he told us about, but I did find those two things. After that time, I partnered with Berry College, and we start looking for descendants of Freemantown. Going through the history and finding that there were at least four other families. There may be more. I'm still researching. And that was the Freemans, the Montgomerys, the Rogers, the Joneses, and the Sanfords that lived on Freemantown. They all intermarried each other. They had a store. They had a blacksmith shop. They grew food. They married each other. They had a bunch of children. So right now, my ancestry account is well over 5,000 people. As a child, my grandfather used to tell me all the time about growing up at Freemantown and how he used to pull the apples off and eat the apples. One thing in particular, he actually showed me. I asked him one day, I said, "Granddaddy, what you doing?" He said, "I'm making up something for my sinus." Well, he didn't call them sinuses. He said for his nose. He said, "I'm going to put a little bit of salt." And he had these little purple flowers. And he said, "I'm going to drop a few of those in there, and I'm going to let it boil for a few minutes, and I'm going to cool it down." And he began to rinse his nose with it. And it was weird to me as a child because I had never seen anybody do that. And he said that that's what clears your sinuses up, doing that in the morning and at night. He married my grandmother back in 1926, and they had 6 children together. And he moved up north. Before getting married, let me correct myself. Before getting married, he moved up north, and he met my grandmother, and they got married. They had 6 children, 2 boys and 4 girls. My mother's right in the middle. And in the summertime, I could tell what he used to do at Freemantown. He would go to each one of his children's house and cut their grass and plant their flowers and plant a garden for them. And he would tend that garden for them. He passed in 1979, and believe it or not, he passed doing some of the things that he liked doing. He went out that morning. It had snowed real bad, and he was trying to open up the water drain. And he started beating on the water drain with an axe, and he died from a heart attack. So since 2010, I've been researching Freemantown history. We found that we came from the Freeman Hurt plantation over in Gordon County. We had our first reunion in 2000, I believe it was 2013. And I was amazed to see all the people that we connected with. Some of the people that even lived here in Rome didn't know they were related to Freemantown. From there, we partnered with Berry College, and we start researching, locating people, connecting with people on Ancestry, finding people in Detroit, even cousins that I didn't even know I had. I went to school actually with one of them, and we never knew we were related. So since that time, I've been trying to create a nonprofit, which I did in 2021. And it's the Freemantown Historical Foundation. And I have board members such as my treasurer is Angela Addison. My secretary is Tanika Jones. My director of community affairs is Vic Hickson. My director of information and technology is Erica Hickson. My vice president is Carrie Hickson. They all answered that call for me when I told them that I was going to start a nonprofit. They all work jobs, but they find time to work with Freemantown. They believe in my passion because that's what it truly is, a passion. And we recently connected with a cousin. Her name is Titania Benton Ellis, and she's our strategist. Michael Jones, we recently connected with last year, and he's our director of marketing. And what our mission is to protect, preserve, and promote Freemantown's legacy. I'm sure that I'm still going to find more family members that don't know they're connected to the Freemantown families. And one of the cousins actually taught most of the elder Freemantown family members here in Rome. Her name is Dr. Ethel Taylor. And when she came into our first reunion, it was so funny. She looked, she said, "I know you, I taught you. I know you," and they kind of reunited with each other, and they were able to tell stories. My grandfather, like I said, he told me somewhat about Freemantown. He told me how he used to run in the woods, and he told us how he used to take the apples off the tree and help his father. His father, Sanford Freeman, was responsible for the cemetery. So he helped his father, and I'm quite sure some of those daffodils that's out there even today are the daffodils that my grandfather planted some 100 years ago. As a kid, my grandfather used to always tell us that we came from richness and that we should be proud of our heritage. And that I am. I'm very proud of our heritage. I'm very proud to know that a Black family once owned almost 600 acres of land, and it was self-sufficient. They didn't have to go within the town, outside of their little community to get what they needed. They grew their own food. They killed their own animals and stuff, and they had a little not a party store, a little general store. So they were very much self-sufficient. And one of the things my grandfather used to tell us as kids is to have our own mind, make our own decisions, and know that whatever we think is right is probably the right thing to do. He was a little stern, I will tell you that. He was pretty much stern. But all in all, he loved his children, he loved his grandchildren. Even now, when I go to his grave, I talk to him and tell him what I'm doing at Freemantown. I know that sounds crazy, but I do. And he used to tell me about that red clay dirt that looked like gold And my first visit here to Georgia was in the summertime, and I arrived here like at 6 in the morning, and all I could see was this red clay dirt. And I looked up in the sky and laughed at my granddaddy, and I said, "You told me about this gold," you know. He said, "We used to eat that," you know. So yeah, he left a stamp in my mind about it. I don't think the other grandchildren has the same passion as I do about it, but I thought it was important to make sure that this story never dies again after 100 years, because it is a very important story to be told because of the richness of the family and the struggles that they went through. I started researching, and when I was researching, I realized that after all the men died on Freemantown, that's when the land started to being sold. My great grandmother, Susie Kathy Freeman, was the last one to sell land on Freemantown in April of 1926. So from that time till I came here in 2010, nobody really knew about Freemantown. Nobody really knew the history of Freemantown because no one had really researched it. So what I'm hoping, having my foundation, is to preserve it and protect it and not let anyone diminish the history ever again. Berry College has been very helpful in researching and partnering with me on some of the projects that I wanted to have done. We have a marker out there finally. We got recognized finally. The president sent us an official letter recognizing Freemantown's contribution. And the cemetery still stands. We believe it's 1.5 acres. My plan is to have it surveyed. I plan to do a monument there at the cemetery for the Freemantown families. And I plan to do a lot of projects in Freemantown's name. Eventually, my hope is I won't recreate the old Freemantown, but I do plan to have a Freemantown community here in Rome, Georgia. Don't know if I said this on the onset, but I'm from Michigan, so it would mean a lot to me to have Freemantown's name stamped in Rome again.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Angela R. James. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I am a representative of the Shelton Family Settlement here at Possum Trot on Berry College. I am the daughter of Eldora James Lewis, the granddaughter of Genevieve Buford, the great-granddaughter of Eldora Buford, or Eldora Spruce Buford, the great-great-granddaughter of Lucy Spruce, and the third great-granddaughter of Hardy and Mary Shelton, fourth great-granddaughter of Lucy Bearden Spullock, and the fifth great-granddaughter of Matilda and Jerry, a reputed half Cherokee man. My grandmother, Genevieve, was born on this land. And her mother, Eldora, whom my mother is named after, was born on this land. In the Flatwoods, in the area that is now known as Possum Trot. In 2015, I was researching my family because I knew we were from Rome, Georgia, but I didn't know any history behind it. Everyone who could tell me, they were all deceased. My mother didn't know much. A few years prior, I saw this beautiful picture of a man and a woman hanging on her wall. And I asked her who they were, and she said, those are the Spruces. Those are my great grandparents. And I said, well, you know, what's their names, their full names? And she didn't know. So it was then that the fire was sort of lit to find out more. And I didn't do it right away, but eventually I did do DNA testing. And through DNA testing, I connected with Mitchell Shelton, who lives here in Rome. Didn't know Mitchell, never seen him before. He had a funny hat on his profile picture. I said, oh, let me click on this guy. He shows as a fourth cousin. And I clicked on his photo and we started corresponding. And then we started showing pictures. And that's really how I came to be involved here with Berry College and in knowing about possum trot, which it wasn't always known as possum trot. That came with Martha Berry acquiring land from many, many families here. But that's how I came to know about possum trot and the Shelton family settlement, and to know who the Spruces were and what they meant to me. So Mitchell and I connected with another cousin, Karen Stewart Ross, who was initially our historian, and she's still serving in that capacity on her own, of course. I have moved on to, with some other cousins, to form a 501c3, the Shelton Descendants Historical Society, and it can be found at sheltondescendants.org. We're in the process of creating our website. But anyway, it was important to me to know where I came from, because it wasn't clear to me on the mother's side, and it wasn't clear to me on the father's side, my father, which that was eventually resolved, and I now know. But my grandmother's female line is unbroken. So we go from me to my grandmother, or to my mother, to my grandmother, to my first great grandmother, second, third, fourth, fifth, all women, an unbroken chain. When I first stepped on this land, I could feel the energy, and I'm speaking about the cemetery at Possum Trot, which was the Possum Trot Cemetery, but it has since been renamed the Shelton Family Cemetery. When I first stepped on that land in 2016 in June, I could feel the energy from the ancestors. It was a feeling that was just overwhelming and profound and unforgettable and long overdue. And I think they were just waiting for folks to come and claim them. And it's not that no one had tried. I think we've discovered that they had, because the Shelton family here in Rome, which is where Mitchell Shelton's family was from, they kept visiting Possum Trot through the years. Every year during the homecoming, they would come just to keep a hand on the pulse. So we are the sister settlement to Freemantown. Freemantown's right up the road. It's like we were sort of embracing each other as communities. Many of our Shelton, Spruce, Shropshire, our descendants, the descendants, married into various Freemantown families. It's important to keep these stories alive, because if we don't, they're going to be gone forever. And we have to cultivate our descendant youth to want to know the history of where they come from, where their people come from, the struggles that they had, the things they had to overcome, the things they were able to accomplish, how they lived their lives. Sometimes being stripped of any and all human dignity, but they were still able to push through and to make it and to survive and to have families and to eventually become educated. I can't even today, when I think about how hard it had to be for them. It's overwhelming and it hurts. But we have to keep the story alive, because it'll be gone if we don't. Yesterday, I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I visited the Equal Justice Initiative, the museum, the Legacy Museum, and it was so hot. My discussion yesterday was about, I didn't know how our families survived in the heat like this, and how they were forced to work and work and work. How did they do it? I don't know. But we owe it to them to keep this going, to continue to educate, to protect, preserve, promote, just as Cheryl said, and what Vic has said. We have to do it. We can't let this just go away. We have to continue. Those are my feelings about the Shelton family settlement, the Freemantown settlement, and any other families who had this type of experience. You have to educate people about it. You have to feel it. You have to want them to know. And I want people to know.
My name is Erica Hickson, and I am from Rome, Georgia. Currently, I'm living in North Carolina at the time. I've been in North Carolina for probably about 33 years. My mother is Mary Hickson. My father is Sanders Hickson. I come from a family of 6. There was 3 girls and 3 boys, kind of like the Brady Bunch. My father and mom had 2 sets of twins. So, and 2 sets of twins that were 2 years apart. So we all know how difficult that could be. And having the last set of twins, I was about 5, if I believe that correctly. I was about 5. So they had their hands full. 2 sets of twins and a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old. So I considered myself to be the right-hand person for my mom. At least that's what I considered. I became a big sister. Also, some of my siblings that are below me would say I'm like a mother to them. But what I remember, some of the stories that my mom used to tell, and that today she still does, if you catch her on a good day, you can hear some of the stories that she tells. They are from Imerchi, Georgia. In Imerchi, Georgia, my grandfather had about 80 acres of land. And from the story that I remember is that he was forced to sell 40 acres of the land just so he could keep 40. And these are the stories that you hear so often from our families, that there were land, but then there were land that, we couldn't keep for whatever reason. I did not know much about Freemantown until around 2013 when I was invited to the first reunion. It was at that point that I learned about Freemantown. And it goes back as far as Meade Freeman, which is my 3 times great. And Meade and Elizabeth Freeman had Emma Freeman. So Emma Freeman became my 2 times great grandmother. And Emma married a Johnson. So from Johnson, that was Joel Johnson. So Joel Johnson is actually my mother's grandfather. And Joel had Helen Johnson, which is my grandmother. So the connection is all related to my mother. I never had a chance to meet my grandmother, which was Helen Johnson. She died really early. She died around about 45, so I never had a chance to meet her. But I did meet my grandfather. And my brother talked a little bit about my grandfather earlier. And so when I mentioned that he had 80 acres, we still today have about 40 of that acres left, which probably Georgia Power came through and had to use part of that as well. But the 40 acres, it's still there. And, when we talk about land, how important it is to keep land in your family. It was just amazing for me to hear that on the Freeman side, that there were over 500 acres that a community that owned that type of land. And it still today exists inside of Berry College. For Berry College, I think is over 27,000 acres. That's a lot of land. And to know that we have some connection to this, these are all the things that have really just inspired me to learn more and more. When Cheryl Freeman came to me and asked, sorry, I use Cheryl Freeman, but when Cheryl came to me and asked me to be a part of the foundation, I have to admit at first, I wasn't sure if this was something that I really truly wanted to do. Didn't really know the need to do it, but I must say, it brings tears to my eyes as well. To know that the history that I have learned, it keeps me wanting to know more and more and more. When I look at documents from U.S. Census, the 1860s, when you see that these people were slaves, but their names are not on the document. They were properties. In the 1870s, they started listing names. But when I saw that, it just brought tears to my eyes to see that these were my family. They were my family. And that you can only imagine what they had to go through in the 1800s, the 1860s, the 1870s. And for us to be here today, where this is important that we teach our children to understand where they come from. And I think when they understand it, that they may be able to see life differently as they're growing into teenage life, until they grow into adults, that they understand that the grounds that they're walking on, or the people that they're standing on, the things that they've had to go through. I think it could change a lot of how they look at how they should carry themselves into life. I mean, there's a lot that you really have to think about when you think about where our parents come from. When I hear my mom talk about the stories of them walking to school, I like to hear the stories I'm not one of those that's like, oh, here we go again with a story. I really want to know. I really want to know, what did you have to go through for you to be here? Because I consider my mother one of the strongest women I know, because she has seen things, she's been a part of the struggles that we can only hear about. And it goes farther than that. When you talk about, the family, Freeman, what did they go through? And when I hear the stories of my mom just walking to school, I did have a chance to see the house that they grew up in. In the 70s, that house was still standing. And I went in the house. It's a 3-room house, no running water, no electricity. And it was about 12 of them that lived in the house. 10 kids, my grandfather, my grandmother. And it's just amazing just to see that they live there. And then we have electricity. We have cars. We have remote controls that go to the TV, right? We got cars that drive themselves. Just to see where we've come from and to also appreciate it, but to also remember that what our ancestors went through, what our parents went through, these are the stories that we have to keep going. These are the stories that we have to keep telling. These are the stories that we have to bring forward. Is just like Cheryl said, we have to protect, we have to preserve, and we have to promote.